Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. First off, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The recognition of the Westwood Media Center, which is live streaming the meeting and also recording it for later viewing in its platform, and particularly Melinda Garfield and Charlotte Lynch for all the work they do for us to get the work out to the public and get feedback. First off, we start off with our superintendent's report. Emily.
Great, thanks. Hello, everyone. Good evening. First thing tonight, I want to share with you something we're very excited about. So we've gone live with a new section on our district webpage. As you are well aware, we have Latifa Frank as our Director of Equity, Integration, and Community Partnerships. And here under Director District Administration, everybody kind of has a page, but we wanted to make sure that we have a page that reflects this work that we're doing as well. And so this is something that Latifa, Allison, and I have been working on for a while, and we wanted to share it with you tonight. We gave ourselves sort of a challenge when creating this, that we wanted to, so we really wanted to have a tool to communicate to the larger community about some of the work that we're doing around equity in the district. And specifically, we wanted to talk about what it is, what it really means in schools, and the why behind the work, and what some of that work looks like in practice. So what we've realized over the last several months is that there's a lot of work that's happening here that's good work, and we maybe haven't done a terrific job communicating it out and making sure that everybody kind of knows and shares what our vision is for the work. So the challenge piece was that we really wanted to create, we wanted to explain things in a way that sort of avoided using a lot of language that people who are steeped in the work tend to use, right? And sometimes when you're using that language for people who are not steeped in the work, they don't know what you're talking about, right? So we wanted to do something that was plain spoken. So I am not going to read it all here, but it starts with the landing page, really referencing that joint statement that was adopted last year by the Westwood Select Board and the Westwood Human Rights Task Force that the school committee signed on to. Amanda was on that committee and Allison representing us. And then you may remember that the administrative council, the district leadership team, also then wrote a letter to the select board sort of affirming our support for it and connecting it to the work in schools. So it begins with that and talks about sort of these 4 big buckets of things that we're thinking about around curriculum instruction, culture and climate, talent recruitment, retention, development, family and community partnerships. That's the landing page. And then we have this page that is, what is equity, where we really try to talk about that in a straightforward manner. So we do that, and then down here at the bottom, we've tried to connect that work to explain how it's related to each of our core values in the district. Like, let's look at our core values through this lens, and what does that mean? We have a page here called Why Integration that really talks about the way that our student body has been changing over time, connects that work, tries to make the connection to some of our initiatives around talent diversification and professional development with staff, and talks about a number of the things that we've been doing in that HR realm. We look at the work and practice here, talking about professional development, talking about some folks who in each building are equity leaders, people who are really interested and committed and involved in this work and have agreed to serve as liaisons for the work in the buildings. And again, sort of giving some examples of the kinds of things that they might be working in each of those areas that we're focused on. We have a resources page. We imagine that this page will be kind of dynamic, that will be changing with time. So you can see here, there's some information about the sculpture that was unveiled over the Martin Luther King weekend, some information and resources about the Lunar New Year. And We have a page that's about community partnerships, some of the community groups that we partner with, some things that are happening within the district. And then finally, we get to policies, all kinds of policies that are in place that are related to this work. And I know that the school committee is engaged in a year-long review of all of the school committee policies, and some of those policies, I think, were very directly related to this and you know, should also be linked on this page. So that's the very quick overview, and let me just ask Latifa and Allison, how'd I do? Anything else you want to say?
Wonderful. The only thing I would add,
Yes.
so in that resource page, so the Embrace sculpture that was unveiled this past weekend, I want to give kudos and a shout out to my alma mater. So I went to high school in Washington, D.C., Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and the visionary behind the Embrace statue is from a Duke Ellington alumni, and I was in the hallways. I didn't know him well, but in the hallways at the same time. So there's a lot of celebration happening in our high school community and friend group. So it's really, really awesome. So
That's great.
yes, we have a connection, personal connection.
That's right. Noted. That's great. And I would also say that this is intended to be a communication tool. And so we've gone live. We've been like fussing with it. Finally, we were like, just put it up, right? And so when people read it, if they have feedback, if we're not communicating clearly, then we would welcome that because we can make adjustments to that. Anything, Allison, you want to add?
No, I mean, I think it's just kind of great to have it out there and coming together. I've been thinking a lot about how we are really changing a lot of things in small ways that sometimes feel like, you know, a small thing here and a small thing there, you know, or the way we're sort of approaching hiring committees, I think that is a great example. And so to sort of see it all coming together is nice. And I hope that it helps folks get a sense of where we are now and where we hope to go.
Yeah. Great.
Any questions from anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Great. And then secondly, I just linked, as we thought might be the case, we have been rejected once again by the MSBA for the Sheehan school. So this was the second time we submitted a statement of interest, and they gave us a polite no, and once again noted how excited they are to be working with us on the Hanlon Deerfield project. So that's the situation, but it was worth another try.
Do you need guidance from the committee if you want to resubmit again?
Yeah, so we would have to do that by April. I mean, we certainly have it ready to go, so we could do that again.
In March.
Yeah,
We vote on it in March.
we'd have to vote on it. Yeah, I'd have
I'd
to.
be for it, but I don't know what people mean. It's not a ton of work. It's just.
It's not a big
I know.
amount of work for us not at this point.
Yeah,
I
at
mean,
this
we've done
point, I
it
mean,
so many
yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would. Okay, that's good to know because we'd have to back it up. We'd have to get a vote of the school committee and the select board.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So,
It would, the sense for you should reapply and look into it?
Yeah.
We'd
Yeah.
like, I think I mentioned when we got our $18 million from the state, everybody was in shock in the room that they're giving money to Westwood. It was only because our buildings were so old and so well maintained. But there were other schools going in to get rebuilt, built in the 70s and 80s. We were in the 50s. So, and it's not always rebuilding, so it's major reconstruction that might be worth looking at, because I'm not sure we're ever gonna get money soon for a new school, but for some major reconstruction, in fact, is probably reasonable. So why don't we proceed, if we could, to
a
resubmit
try.
it and see
Yeah.
what else we could.
I mean, it's interesting. I know the number of people they admitted was like 10 or 11, but like interestingly, from where it was like 85 when we applied for Hanlon, 90, and I think
Yeah.
it's only like 55 here. So
Yeah.
it's interesting the number of applications is going down too.
It's
so-
gone down.
so,
Yeah.
who
And
knows?
they've suspended their accelerated repair program. They're only focusing on the core now, just so that they can try to provide more resources to districts that get into the core program, given like the cost escalation in construction now. So, okay, great, we'll do that. And then a student services director search update. Allison was going to do that. Do you want to? I think you need a microphone though, if you want to jump up here.
And Amanda was there too. So. Am I live? Okay. So we had our first kickoff meeting for the large but enthusiastic committee yesterday. And I think it's going to be a really great process. We are working with an outside consultant, which you're aware, who is doing some direct recruiting of candidates. And I just got an update from her today. We are looking at, as of right now, kind of a good number of candidates given the sort of size of the pool out there. This is not a position where we get hundreds of applications. It's a position where we'd be in great shape if we got somewhere between 7 to 10 high quality applications. So that's just to give you a sense of scale. We have a nice committee that includes some wonderful student representatives. I think they were some of our stars of yesterday's kickoff meeting. Parents and staff and kind of all levels, all schools and neighborhoods represented at this point. Yesterday's was really a chance to sort of think about what the job description is, what the feedback we got from the community is, how to craft questions that help match what we're looking for with the kind of interview process. And we'll kind of continue to refine those, and we start interviewing week after next. So that's, anything else you can think of, Amanda, that I...
I don't think so. I think you covered it. I think you and Latifah did a fantastic job. I learned a lot, and the group seems great. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Allison, the best case scenario, what would be the time when we could hire somebody?
I mean, I really hope we will have finalists that visit before February break, and we'd be able to sort of do our reference checking, make an offer immediately, either during or after the break. My goal is really if we can find someone who's able to come and do some overlap time before we lose our current director, who's fantastic, that would be ideal, because it would allow for some kind of training and onboarding.
So that'd be with us to the end of the year,
Yeah, yeah,
so we can get some good training out of you.
yeah, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the process, the larger group will narrow it down to like
Yes.
the top candidates, and then it's up to the superintendent to make the final decision.
We'll do kind of a process with finalists that's similar to what we've done with other kind of big positions in the district. So finalists will be here to do a boots on the ground visit where they can see different programs at different levels, interact with staff, interact with students. We will do a staff forum and a parent forum. Probably both of those will be on the same day, so people can come once and meet all three candidates. We're going to try and make those a sort of hybrid mode, so people can attend them either virtually or in person. And from that, we gather a lot of feedback, and then comb through it all, and then find the best kind of person who's going to help continue to build on what we have and move the district forward.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Next item we're going to do is a public comment. We welcome people to come forward and talk to us. We limit each comment to 3 minutes. Unfortunately, we don't respond to your comments at this time. We just listen. But we do have something called office hours, where we interact, we go back and forth, we debate things and all. So that comes up every couple of months. We have office hours. But tonight, we'd welcome people to speak for up to 3 minutes. We'd like you to come forward, identify yourself, your name and your address, and we'll just take you on. If you could raise your hand who would like to come forward, and we'll take turns. Yes,
I
please.
apologize, I forgot the 3-minute slide with the timer, so I'll give a wave with like 30 seconds to go, okay?
I am so sorry about that.
She's like the best thing ever.
Sorry, I think. Are you gonna, come here. I'm so, well. Do you want me to take her? Do you want to go say Pauline?
She gets 3 minutes too.
This is so embarrassing.
It's okay.
We mostly like children here.
But as you can see, like in this room, this is why I love this community so much. I just like the acceptance. So, thank you. So my name is Eileen Siegel, 257 Alder Road. And tonight I'm speaking again in support of Westwood educators. Since I spoke at the last meeting in December, I've done some digging and have been asking lots of questions to fellow stakeholders. I understand that the budget is what it is and money does not grow on trees. I appreciate the thought, the planning, and the difficult decisions that must be made. And that being said, I just have a couple of concerns I just wanted to throw out there. I am a bit middle school focused because that is what I teach. So something that really makes me concerned is the Thurston Middle School Instructional Technology Coach has been cut from full-time to 0.5. I understand there's also cuts at the high school level. However, my issue is not having someone full-time at the middle school. This doesn't make sense to me. Constantly is ever evolving and changing. As a almost 46-year-old teacher, it's really hard for me. And I would say that there are other teachers in the Westwood District who are also in my bracket. I just get concerned that who's going to generate and deliver lessons about safety and online responsibility, provide technology training for new technologies, and provide support for the unexpected needs of teachers and students throughout the day. And that's my biggest concern, is the unexpected needs that come up, especially in middle school. I also understand that the district needs to provide a certain number of PDP hours to teachers. I know that teachers are asking for more time. What I wish would happen is that their Wednesdays could be split and they could have the PD time for the first hour and then given that time to work with what they've learned in the next hour. So to take what they've learned and apply it to their lessons and collaborate, but not be micromanaged. So if we just trust them, give them the directive and let them have that hour to prioritize what they need to prioritize in that moment. A perfect example is I know that the Thurston Middle School teachers are doing a book study for the remainder of the year, and they've been directed to use their planning time to read the books they've been assigned. This is exactly the kind of thing that we all talk about when we say, and I say we because I'm a teacher, like we want more time. We did this last year at my school. It was maddening because we needed to plan together and collaborate and talk about data, and if a kid was having a bad day, that's what we needed that time for. And while reading is important and learning all these things is important during the school day, it's an extra stress. Something else I just wanted to bring up is that Thurston Middle School has added another 3 administrators in the last 5 years. But I know there's how much, Emily? 660 students, 650? Around there,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah.
And I do think it's imperative for a middle school to have 1 administrator per grade, absolutely. What does concern me is that there are middle school department heads who do evaluations, but they're not teaching. So the primary and secondary evaluators, neither of them are in the classroom. I know that the principal, assistant principal, and dean aren't in the classroom, but I think it's really important for someone who is teaching, who is in the trenches, working with the curriculum, weathering the storm, is also...
I forgot the 30-second wave. Sorry, that's a 3-minute, so, but
I'm
wrap
done.
it up.
Thank you.
I fell asleep at the switch. Sorry, Eileen. I was listening.
No, I apologize. You guys always give me so much time. So, and I do go to office hours, and I appreciate it. So
you.
I just wanted to bring those things up because, you know, I just care so much about our teachers and all of you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Eileen.
Not anyone else, please come forward. Thank you.
My name's Jay Wasserman, 68 Birch Tree Drive. I'm also a teacher, not in Westwood, and a middle school teacher as well. And it's concerning to me that that they would be thinking about cutting tech, because it's amazingly important to be able to have that support when you need it. When you're getting ready to present a lesson, you have a class full of kids and the tech's not working. And you can G-chat somebody real quick and they come down in 5-10 minutes, everything's back online and you can continue with your lesson. Kids kind of have that expectation that you'll be able to figure it out and get it going. So rather than being like, all right, we're going to take out the paper now, when they were expecting something else. So engagement in the classroom is important, and being able to continue that flow, because, I mean, we, at the school I work at, people just got new computers. Suddenly when they hook up to their ladybugs, the computer shuts down. So then they had to figure out, work through that snafu. So I guess imagine if you were in your job and you were presenting to, maybe if you're in the sales field, you're presenting a sales presentation and something goes down and you don't have anybody to help you fix it. It can be very daunting. So that's a valuable position. Plus the kids need the support too, because their Chromebooks are, constantly malfunctioning. A lot of kids may not have come in with charged Chromebooks, so you've got to deal with that as well. On the PD side, listening to what Eileen was saying, we've been finding that it's much more beneficial to have that presentation time and then, all right, now go work on it. And usually what we're working on connects to our goals or other directly incentivized needs. So it's not like we're just gonna go, oh, we're just gonna go kick back and do paperwork, which we do on our own time anyway, but it's helpful for us to be able to take what we're learning and then apply it and go forward.
You've still got 30 seconds. Sorry. That was the wording.
That's fine. That covers really what I wanted to focus on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else interested in public comment? Well, thank you very much for both of you, and don't forget, we will announce our office hours. We have interchange, and it's more discussions going on, so thank you. We'll move on to school committee chair updates, liaison reports, chair update. First of all, I think we're all been following for the last 3 or 4 weeks COVID and what's going on, what other school systems are doing, and some are wearing masks and all, but I think we have been very fortunate to have a lot of people here on top of this and following it. We're quite concerned with the concern many years ago of our teachers, that they would be protected, and from our kids telling us that they were really willing to do things to protect their grandparents and the grandparents of their friends who might be at risk. So I think we're quite concerned about that and need to keep our eye on it. I want to thank Emily and for bringing back the Dale Carnegie program for the J term this year, and they're allowing kids who missed it the last 2 years to participate in it. It's a wonderful opportunity for kids to get advanced training in how to win friends and influence people, and how it can be used in healthcare and business and many other things. I'm also planning to retire in a couple of months, which is good news for a lot of people I know.
No, Charlie, it is not good news.
My dog is saying it's good.
Your dog.
But,
We have to meet this dog.
Right. You have to get a dog at your
It keeps the meetings going fast. But I want to thank everybody for all the wonderful time I've had working with you all. Our next report is the school building project update. Yeah.
So the building continues to go up. We are still on schedule, and I believe we are still on budget. So fingers crossed we continue that way. We had, I don't know, I can't remember when we had the topping off ceremony. Was that
December.
We already talked about that? Did we
Nope.
talk about that?
Nope.
Okay. So we had a topping off ceremony, which was really, actually, I wish I should have brought pictures. It's tradition in construction that the last beam that goes into the building, everyone signs. So Emily in the district was able to get the entire Deerfield over to the Hanlon, and also the Hanlon kids, and all of the kids signed the beams. We also got a couple adults to sign it as well. And then it was hoisted into place, and on top an American flag and a tree are placed, and the tree is symbolic, I think, of a safe construction site. And again, it's tradition in construction. So if you drive by and you see the flag and the tree, you'll know that was the beam that has everyone's signatures on it. So that was a really exciting day, and I know it was sort of last minute request, so I know you and Matt and Josh really pulled that together, and I think the kids really, really loved it. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, and we're continuing. The steel is almost completed. I think soon we're going to start seeing we see a little bit of the shape of the building, but it's starting to come together. Mm-hmm. So.
I would just add that, so they've started the drilling for the geothermal wells, which our design team had prepared us. They really managed our expectations. They were like, this is going to be really loud and terrible, and so I think we were really braced for that. But Mr. K is giving me the thumbs up that so far it's been, I mean, we were convinced it was going to be really bad. So I think it's not as bad as that, luckily.
Yeah. And what I understand, it's because the site of the land, they're able to do a lot of the drilling not from top up, but in the ground. So the sound is really being muffled, and I think it's much, much less intrusive than even they thought it was going to be. So that's great news.
Good.
I know a lot of us said, how to get out there to even see it, what trail, but I think the public can drive up that street that's right next to the school.
Laura Lane,
Laura
yep.
Lane, goes up in a turn, you go right up and see the building, it's a beautiful
Yeah, if you
view.
take the walking trail from Laura Lane, the
Yeah.
entrance is on Laura Lane, you walk right by the site, and so you get a really good view, bird's eye view of the
You
building.
can't see anything from Gay Street, but you go up that street,
Yeah.
it's an incredible building, well-designed and thought through, but
Yeah,
thank you
and
for-
it'll be really neat. I think when you see it, you'll see how much of it will be surrounded by trees, so I think it's really gonna be beautiful.
Thank you very much. Policy Review Committee, Amanda proceeds, keeps going.
Yep, we keep moving along with this. The only update, I think is worth providing, Dory actually just pointed out to me, the section, G, where in personnel, where it talks about private tutoring, that I think we should probably bring that back to Jim. We had kind of said that we were going to eliminate, the option for private tutoring, on school property. But, Dory had a good point that, that could be problematic related to like mini courses or different things that, teachers and staff might be doing for PTO purposes. So maybe to go back to Jim and see if we can reword it to say something like with principal or district authorization or something, so that teachers are still able to use that space.
Okay. Yeah, we should take that back.
Yeah. And that's all I have on.
We did have one issue on idling of cars.
Yes.
And I was asked to talk to the chief of police. So Westwood's chief of police was thrilled that we asked him for his advice. He says, I support everything you're doing, thank you for calling us up. So we've cleared it with him for
Great.
changes we would like to make on having very short time to idle cars for the safety of the kids.
And Charlie, I mean, Riley was at the meeting as well, but I believe the Legislative Council at the high school is also looking to do some
Yep.
work around the idling.
Yeah.
There
Riley,
was a
could you
lot of
tell us
discussion
about
about
that?
it.
Yeah, I mean, I know Mr. Donahue was more focused on the idling with the parents and the pickup line, but we were really more concerned about the idling in the parking lot because we see a lot of that we have a free period in the middle of the day called S block, and there's a lot of students just go to their cars to turn it on and sit in them. So we were kind of thinking of ways we could prevent that.
So we're fortunate the Legislative Council is advising us with their opinions as big brothers and sisters, but also very good points. You need a campaign, just don't tell the public once, do it over and over again. So a lot of good ideas are coming from the Legislative Council. Thank you. Anything more on policy? The update on the collective bargaining.
We issued a statement to the community. We're in mediation. I don't think it'd be appropriate to say anything else beyond that, the statement that we issued to the community.
Okay. The superintendent search update.
Yep, so we have sent out a couple communications to the community. We have started the process. We have engaged Jim Hardy with the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to assist us with the search as a consultant. Two things we are asking from the community. The first is if you are interested as a parent or guardian or faculty or staff member to be a part of the search committee, we are looking for representatives. We're asking that people submit just a quick email of interest detailing your connection to the Westwood Public Schools to Harley, preferably by tomorrow. We do want to form this committee sooner rather than later, so preferably by tomorrow. We've gotten a great response so far. We are going to be looking at those responses in total, probably over the weekend or on Monday. The second thing that everyone could do is to respond to the superintendent search survey that's been that we have circulated a couple times. This will really, really help us understand from the community what the community feels is important in a superintendent. It will also direct and guide us when we're coming up with questions for the finalists. So it's a critical step in our search process. So if everyone could take 5 minutes and fill out that survey, that would be very much appreciated. And then, next steps are forming the committee and posting the job description, and hopefully that posting will go up hopefully next week. That's the plan.
Most of the activity we're asked other people to be involved will be after the February break, so there will be opportunities. There'll be the search committee process, then there'll be site visits, like similar to what they're doing.
Yeah.
But those will be open to everyone in the community. That'll be in the March timeframe. So.
Yeah, we'll have some, I think, community sessions maybe where you can come and meet the finalists. I think we'll do that.
And we are putting, Harley's, we are going to put out a webpage, and I think it's in development, that will have additional details and timelines as well, so. Can I ask, is that all you have?
Yeah, that's all.
Before, I know the extended day is going to be a longer conversation, but just one other thing I'd mention on the school building project. I continue to get a lot of questions about redistricting, will there be any or none? I just think we should, at some point, even if we're not changing anything, I think we will have to probably formally vote to like say those districts are all going to Hamlin. I don't know what the process is, but we should just, I continue to get a lot of questions on that. Is it basically going to be, is it going to be Deerfield?
Yeah.
So anyway, we don't need to address it today, but
Yes, well, I will just say out loud
Yeah,
to alleviate any
yeah,
concerns
yeah.
that, so when we discussed consolidation,
Yeah.
you voted to consolidate Hanlon and Deerfield, the building, but we also talked about the fact that basically those two districts would just come together
Okay.
at Hanlon. And so certainly for the opening of the building,
Okay.
there's no plan to do anything else. That was sort
Okay.
of the result of our redistricting study, with the following proviso that right now University Avenue
Okay.
is like a swing district where students attend either Downey,
Yeah,
Hanlon,
okay.
or Deerfield. Everybody will go to Hanlon, Deerfield.
Okay.
Anyone who's currently a Downey obviously
Right,
would be
okay.
grandfathered. We wouldn't move anybody.
And
we
their
keep,
siblings.
We keep
Okay.
siblings
Okay.
together, so it'll be a process, but we haven't been placing
Okay.
new incoming kindergartners
Oh,
at
that made
Downey.
the answer. But we may
Yeah.
just need procedure to do a formal
Yep.
vote on that,
Yep.
I guess, at some point.
Yeah, we just erase the line
Yeah. and-
between the
okay.
two
Okay.
districts.
Yes.
Thank Mayor and Tony for your co-chairs of this search committee for superintendent. Next item is extended day working group, proposed rate changes.
Yeah, thank you. So honestly, early on, there was a lot of work done between a small group, but I would say over the last month, it's really been Lemma working some Excel spreadsheet magic, and using a lot of the comparative data that we had from other districts, I think, to inform that Excel spreadsheet. So I'll let you sort of, take it from here with the
Thank
memo.
you. So I provided a memo for the school committee that summarizes extended day tuition recommendations. And this is what we had queued up in December through our presentation, which provided more context on the market and what has been happening in our program, including strengths and some of the areas that we feel are still challenges. The goal of the tuition increase that we're proposing is threefold. First and most significant is to address a significant operating deficit. That's $230K, projected to be $230K by the end of this fiscal year. The second goal is to fully account for the costs that are absorbed in the school budget in order for us to support the extended day program and start to charge those, appropriately budget for those in the extended day program. And the third is to strengthen staffing and supports for the program itself. So those are the goals of the tuition increase. I provided in the memo, again, some of the market context for this to show you where the sizes of other programs and where their tuitions are. And I did break that down with a little bit more detail, showing you the 5-day tuition rates for some neighboring programs and also 4-day tuition rates, and more on that as I continue to summarize this. I just want to remind everyone that the goal of this tuition change is not to change anything about enrollment. We've made a commitment to address some of the waitlist concerns and to think about how to manage the waitlist better next year. But our assumptions have been to keep enrollment exactly where it is this year. We would try to, as always, maximize our short Wednesday enrollment, and that's one of the areas that we've felt the most pressure. The other thing that we've done over the past year is we've worked a lot to develop a budget and really get a hold of all the expenses and how they impact this program, and also to increase pay rates for staff and to build in some recruitment incentives so that we can actually fill the positions that we need to support the program at the current enrollment level. So those measures have already been taken. They've been incorporated into the budget. They are paid for in these tuition proposals and in the budget that I've developed for this. So there are two options here, and I'll highlight some of the differences in the two options. The first option, A, is to increase the tuition in the extended day program from what is now like a base rate of $5.70 per hour to a base rate of $8.55 per hour. So that's an increase of $2.85 per hour that a family is sending their child to the program. I looked at the base rate because this is what we use to calculate all of the monthly tuitions that are charged to families. So whether it's a 5-day or 3-day or 4-day program for that student. That's the more costly tuition version. The option B would be to increase the base rate to $7.75 per hour. So what that does in option A, let me take a pause actually. So you've got one at $8.55, the other at $7.75. In both versions, there is a enrichment fee on short Wednesdays. So there is a specific higher fee that families would pay. They would pay 3 times the hourly rate so whatever that may be in each proposal on short Wednesdays for the hours that they're attending. So they would be paying that enrichment fee to cover enrichment programming that happens on short Wednesdays. It's one of the mechanisms that we've discovered helps us to sustain the program on short Wednesdays where it's really hard to staff. It also is a way to address the fact that there's a lot of demand for short Wednesdays and not enough spaces. So this is a response to the market demand. So both versions of this proposal incorporate this surcharge on short Wednesdays.
So, sorry, so
Sure.
so you pay what you would normally pay on a day, plus in option A, you'd pay $25.65 on top of that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's for each short Wednesday that your child is enrolled. Usually
Right.
there are 19 per year, so you're paying that $25 fee
Times 19.
over 19 times. Yep.
Okay, got it.
That's incorporated into the monthly tuition. So the way we'd imagine we'd bill for this is like we'd just roll it into the monthly tuition for the family. If they're enrolled on Wednesdays, there's a higher tuition. Now I summarize the monthly tuitions under option A and option B. In option A, the highest is $564 per month, including the short Wednesday fee. That's for families that were a student who's attending Monday through Friday. That is still $100 less than what Medfield charges, but it is a significantly higher tuition if we go with that option. In option B, the tuition for a student who is attending Monday through Friday would be $512 per month. So that keeps us just $1 shy of where Norwood is, and again is significantly higher than where we are today. But that's for context. That's the max that families would pay for 5 days a week. Our tuition would be substantially lower for the 4 days because that short Wednesday surcharge isn't incorporated. So a family that decided to skip the short Wednesday would see a tuition even in option A that's $369, and then option B $335. So I'm pointing out those swings because they impact what would be where we fall as compared to the market comps table. That's it there for pricing. In terms of real differences in what we can afford in these programs, in both of these versions of the budget, we address the budget deficit. In both of the versions, we're assuming the same enrollment numbers. And in both tuition models, the costs borne in the district we start to defray some of that, so we assume a $45K increase in their contribution of extended day towards district costs. So that is good news. There is a difference though in what we can do in staffing in version A versus version B. In version A, we're able to add more behavioral support. So I provided an example of what we could do with that. We could have a professional position for behavioral supports such as the BCBA as well as 2 ABAs as a case study, as an example. We could afford that in option A, we couldn't in option B. So we'd have to make some tough decisions there. And we also would be able to afford a lower ratio of students to staff in option A. So we just have better ratios for the groups as we establish them. Open to any questions about this. I understand that it is complex.
What is the ratio right now? I'm just curious.
So
Today, before this year.
We are closer to option A now, but we are also enhanced by high school students, and I've anticipated in some of the budget models that we're going to need more group leaders because we're going to start to see the impact of the start times change in our staffing models in the future. So we'll have less availability of high school students just to support and lend a hand.
Got it. Okay.
So is there question?
Well, so the target is to vote at the February meeting. So
Okay.
we thought
Yeah.
we'd put them out here, get a sense of where people are,
Wanted
if
to see if
there's
there are any
anything else
questions.
you want to know.
So both of these options would make us, now, would they cover the current gap and make us net neutral going forward, or just make us net
That's a
neutral?
good question. So they would cover the current deficit and allow us to operate and break even in future years. In addition, because they're contributing a little bit more towards defraying costs that are absorbed in the district budget, I think that's important. I have not incorporated that increase, like it's basically an offset increase in the district budget. We've not incorporated that in the FY24 proposed budget for the schools, in part because we know we need to address a budget deficit from this fiscal year that we're gonna be carrying. So we're gonna catch up and resolve the budget deficit in this year and start to operate. No
And
longer
either
be
A
direct.
or B does that?
Either A or B does that, so
Okay.
we're able, A and B are both workable, you know.
And is
ultimately.
there any discussion about some sort of timetable for regular increases so that 10 years from now, we're not in another position where we have to do a huge bump?
Yes, so we contemplated this, we didn't wanna build it in, because this is a significant change, and we wanted to see what happens to our enrollment numbers and allow this just to settle. So I think this is a year in which we would test an increase and observe and see if we're able to manage it and hire the staff that we wanna hire at the rates that we project, continue to see the same enrollment numbers. If families, continue to enroll at the short Wednesdays despite the surcharge, so these are some of the things to test for the first time.
Right, okay.
I mean, I guess, this is just me, I mean, given all the other fee increases, I would say, since it's covering the deficit in either scenario, I would personally say go with B and we can revisit another year. Since, I mean, I think, basically, A, you're reinvesting a little bit more in staff, if I'm understanding it. It doesn't change the fundamental, I mean, that'd be good. I think that's where I am, just because we're hitting people with another $200,000 on the fees right now. So that's, I guess, where I am. Like, we can test. It's all a big increase. It covers the deficit, and you can revisit it a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a long-term goal should be making this program as strong as it could be. But to Tony's point, B gets us to where we need to be now with less of a shock and awe to parents. But I do want to sort of put a reminder for us in a year, maybe next April, when numbers have settled, to look at this again, because our mistake was not looking at this, right? And so now we're playing catch up after 10, 15 years or whatever. I think I would probably be in favor of option B, but I do think we need to make this part of our regular review, whether it's in connection with budget or whether it's after budget or however we do it, because I don't want to get so far behind again. And that should go for all fees.
I
frankly.
completely agree with that statement, so this isn't this is an and. And I think the other thing that's happening here is I want to give Lemma a lot of credit. I think that she has been somebody who has really gotten a handle on what's happening.
We started having these
Yeah.
conversations when Lemma came on board.
Yes.
And that's not a coincidence. So
No, so
kudos
well
to
done.
Lemma
Yeah.
for trying to fix these problems we have.
I mean, we were in the green for a long time, I think. And
Yes.
it just crept up on us and,
Yeah.
And certainly now, there's a very clear deficit here that we cannot ignore.
Yep.
And it would be irresponsible. We couldn't close the budget, and continue to do that
Yep.
without addressing that.
I think next year is going to be a little bit of a different year anyway, because we're going to have this somewhat fractured year where, Hanlon and Deerfield will be in different buildings and they'll be together. And we're not clear at this point whether then we're going to separate the extended day program into 4 locations or less than that, which would add a transportation cost if it goes down. So I think it makes sense to pause, after in 12 months and say, okay, now where are we?
Reassess.
Based on, and to reassess.
Okay.
And I think it would be interesting maybe at that time too, we obviously don't have the time to do it now, but to learn more about the other programs and what they're doing with what they're charging. So do they have the ABAs, do they have nurses, and or what are they doing in terms of enrichment, those sort of things. I'd have to learn more
So-
about that.
I think we learned that there is, I think, ABA support. We did see that in the survey that we did, that Michael did this fall. Less so on the nursing. And we had talked about, you know, is there a way sort of around that or not? The enrichment, though, and we could certainly ask, but I think we were hoping to do something that all the kids could be involved in, not just different groups. So I'm sure people are always happy to share enrichment ideas.
Yeah, I want to
So,
give a lot of credit to Michael,
Yes.
who has been behind the scenes and conducting a lot of the survey
Absolutely.
and like on the ground research for this. And he did reach out and talk to some programs about that, and he's continuing to do that. So we're taking a second pass and reaching out to programs of similar size, especially because we want to understand what we can learn from the way that they're staffed and managed, because of the pressures that we felt as we started to grow with our enrollment. So.
Is there a way of breaking down this data, and if we can't, you don't have to go out and do it, but so that it's a per day amount?
Yeah.
Because you pay the same whether you pick up your child at 4 or 6 or whatever, and so it seems to me that Monday through Friday the rate's always the same, except short Wednesdays where it's an additional 25. And I think seeing that comparative, what's the daily rate, you know, pulling out that 25 or whatever it is, with respect to these other programs, that might be helpful too. I don't know if it'll be the same results.
Yep.
Presumably it would, but I just think seeing a
We can
daily
present
rate might
that
be helpful.
at the next meeting when we are voting. Yeah.
Because then we're not trying to figure out 5-day versus 4-day and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I just want, sorry, go ahead, Charles.
I have a question on the 123 wait list. Is there anything that can be done about that? Short-term, future, nothing? That's, you know, right now, there's only 2 communities with a higher wait list than we. Is it, can it be dealt with? Can we?
I think there are a couple of measures that we think are appropriate for this coming year, and one of them is to open the program open enrollment really early.
Yep.
And this is why we're part of why we're presenting and talking about this in the winter, so that we can allow families to enroll early on and find other alternatives if this program reaches capacity. We also need to determine if the what the realistic wait list should be.
Yep.
And just cap it there
There
and
may be
be
people
super
dropping out
transparent with
because of the
families.
fees, so you may not have.
Yeah.
But if it were to say in that range, are there any things we can do to shorten it?
Not much. I mean, we will have to cap capacity at some level because of not only staffing and space concerns.
Yeah.
So those are real constraints that we have to live with. But I would say we're thinking creatively about how to make sure that we admit everyone we can admit, and part of the approach with tuition increase on Short Wednesday is to make sure that the people who really want Short Wednesday attend there and others find alternatives. And we're going to also be looking to see how we can incorporate programming on Short Wednesdays to make sure we can admit as many people as possible. So.
Now, I know we've looked at this in a lot of different ways, but there are a lot of families in Westwood with unemployment. They're struggling themselves just to make ends meet. Is there any possibility of people getting assistance, financial assistance for this? Is that a possibility?
I'm glad you asked that. That was supposed to be one of my talking points. So we do have in both versions of the budget an allowance for tuition reductions.
Yep.
And we made it, we budgeted for 8%, which is roughly the number of families in Westwood that are lower income. So we certainly could exceed that if there is even more demand. So we're committed to providing a tuition reduction where it's appropriate for families. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just to be, so I just want to make it clear, because in both A and B, if I'm reading this right, there are allowances for 2 ABAs.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just would allow us to afford a third, maybe a professional
Got it.
position.
Okay, fine, okay.
Whereas
That's
B would
okay.
not. But we do have some behavioral supports in both
Okay.
versions, yeah.
Which we don't have now.
Which we don't have now. Yeah,
Right.
so in both versions,
Okay.
we have substantially more supports for the program.
Okay.
So I think I'm hearing, but tell me if I'm incorrect. I think that I'm hearing general support for option B, and we can vote it, but we're feeling comfortable there isn't sort of more work to be done to try to do something else at this point. I want us to have it in place so that we can open registration.
Do we have
early
general
this year.
support without a
Sound
vote
good?
for B? I think we do. Yeah.
Nothing more that we need in terms of being able to move forward. Okay, great.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you, guys.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you.
Dory.
Lemma and Michael did a ton, so.
Yeah, I know Michael's done a lot, so thanks to Michael.
A few months, Lemma.
That's out of
Here.
Lemma busy.
Now moving ahead to the discussion items. Proposed fiscal '24 budget.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, so we had a lot of discussion at last month's meeting to sort of set the stage for tonight's proposed budget presentation. So tonight, my plan is to briefly remind everyone of the context for the FY24 budget, and then we'll look in detail at the proposed operating budget, and turn it over to Lemma to talk a bit about the capital budget priorities, and then we'll talk about next steps in the process. I will say that since our meeting in December, the Budget Steering Committee with the town has met 3 times, so there has been a lot of work that's happened since the last meeting. You may recall that last month we talked about the fact that we would require a 5.65% increase for level services. We kind of talked about trying to come in at 5. My proposed budget tonight is 4.5, but you're going to see that really it's more like 5, but we've worked with the town to try to do some things to keep that percentage down while also meeting sort of the needs that we had discussed in that other 0.5%. So quickly, as you recall, we're in a very challenging moment in terms of budget. There are really 3 major pressures or drivers that we're feeling at this point. So first is increased costs due to inflationary pressures. For example, this number we've recalculated and it has gone up again. So the heating fuel costs, we're seeing a 30% increase over FY21. That is a significant increase for us. As we mentioned last month, our transportation contract with our bus company has increased. It increased 7.4% in this current year. We had budgeted for 3 because we were doing the budget at this time last year and things kind of hadn't started to go haywire yet. We have a 7% increase in FY24. I do just want to do a little sidebar here to say that when I made this comment about the bus contract going up last month, I think some people misunderstood and think that that's a labor contract and that we were providing like 7% increases to bus drivers and others. So the bus drivers are not employed by the district. This isn't a labor contract we're talking about. This is a service contract, right? So we have a contract with the bus company to keep bringing the buses here and driving our kids around, right? So there may be some things about staffing increases there, but we don't know. But it's definitely about fuel increases as well. We also are feeling the inflationary pressure on the special ed transportation contract. So that's the vans that transport students both in district and out of district. We saw a 10% increase in the current year and had budgeted for 3. So relatively good news. We've managed to negotiate a contract for FY24 that is, I can't believe I'm saying only 4%, but that is feeling like good news at this point. So there's that driver. Second driver, significantly increased costs in special education due to a couple things. We've had several unexpected tuitions due to students moving into town over the summer who had IEPs with out-of-district placements. Operational Services Division has told us to expect a 14% increase in private out-of-district tuitions next year. And then, of course, unknown salary increases, with salaries representing 85% of the total operating budget. We have, at this point, 1 unsettled contract. We have to make assumptions for the teacher's contract for both FY23 and FY24 because they compound. So we've just had to make some assumptions there. So all of those things are creating some challenges and a deficit for FY23 that now is about, we think, $1.4 million. You're going to see on the Q2 report. And so what we're navigating right now is how to sort of manage that situation this year to close this fiscal year successfully, but also how to incorporate those increases into the FY24 budget.
So just
Yes.
to be clear.
Yeah.
In December, it was 1.1,
Yeah.
and now it's 1.4.
Things aren't going in the
We're
right
not
direction.
trending in the right direction.
They're not trending in the right direction,
I have
but
to say, we'll talk through that more next month. I do have all the numbers. And some of that is like that we're continuing to encumber costs, right? So we're opening PO. Some of it is like supply spending for the schools, and other things are really like new encumbrances. So I'll break it down, and we'll talk about like if there are any worries, but we will be able to land. I'm still confident we will be able to land a year on, and close the year and close the budget. Not really on
Lemma
budget.
is still
right, but
sleeping
with
at
the
night,
funds.
and she's good. We've talked extensively about this, so we still think we have a plan. It's okay. I do note that yes, it's only halfway through the year, right? And we don't usually see some of these tuition issues this early. So, watching that very carefully. Okay, and so, because of these realities, the proposed FY24 budget recommends a higher increase than in the last several years at 4.5%. Even with this higher increase, though, this proposed budget reflects a cut to level services. So it would take 5.6% to have a level services budget. Level services, to remind people, means effectively that we would open the schools in the fall with the same people and stuff that we have this year. And we would need a 5.65% increase in order to do that. And that isn't within the realm of realistic. So we have developed the budget using multiple strategies to try to get to a budget increase that is reasonable and mitigates the impact to cutting level services. We have done that with many prongs. So we have increased offsets to the budget. We have proposed increasing user fee revenue, right? Both of these are things that sort of bring money in. That wasn't enough, and so we have had to make some reductions in staff. We are making our best assumptions about contract settlements. And I put this in bold, we really are working very collaboratively with the town. So the budget steering process, I mean, we've talked about many, many options. And as I will sort of explain later, at our last meeting, we really did come up with something where the town is going to be providing us some real help this year that is going to then help us next year. And I appreciate that. And in proposing this 4.5% budget, which is pretty high compared to the past, and what we would say is affordable and sustainable under the confines of Prop 2.5 that we talked about last year, there still is a gap to be made up before this is reality. But in budget steering, really, everyone has committed to saying, let's work towards that. Let's try to figure that out. So I really do appreciate that. So factors considered in the budget priorities, we always look at contractual salary obligations and other fixed costs, that's like the starting point. We need to have an increase that will cover this. We look at enrollment trends to understand where kids are in the district, how they're distributed. We look at current student needs, and we also always try to keep our strategy for district improvement out there so that while we feel like we're triaging some things, we're still making progress and making sure the budget aligns with our priorities. So we'll start with salaries. So school budgets are largely about people. We're people-driven organization. You can see here that our operating budget is comprised 85% of salaries, the blue pie wedge. And what we did here was show you that how this blue pie wedge breaks down, right? So if we look at salaries, 57% of the salaries in the district are for teachers. We have individual contracts. That's, people in central office. It's principals, it's assistant principals, but it's other people you may not think of. Harley, my executive assistant, is on an individual contract, right? So sort of people who are in roles that are like singular roles who have their own contracts, right? We have some non-bargaining. We have instructional assistants, custodians, ABA tutors, administrative assistants. If we take a look at the enrollment trends, what you see is that over long periods of time, the overall enrollment of the district, it goes up a little, it goes down a little, but it sort of always hovers vaguely around 3,000. That's been the case for a very long time. But what does really change is where the students are in the district. So that shifts between secondary and elementary. And if I had made the graph so that it went way back further than 2008, you would see that it's kind of cyclical. You can kind of see some things happening there. So the story of this is that for a long while here, the secondary enrollment was increasing, it peaked, and then it started to go down, and at the same time, the elementary enrollment was going down, and now it's turned and it's gone back up, and our enrollment projections with people who studied these things indicate that we should expect the elementary enrollment to be climbing now for several years.
But it has kind of flatlined.
It has kind of, and so
I mean,
it's
you know,
interesting.
a little bit up, it hasn't, you know.
Yeah, it's true, and it's interesting because it's flatter than our projections
Right.
would have suggested, and something has. I'll show this. Something has happened post-COVID. I'm not sure what that is yet. I think it's too early to tell. So. Just quickly what this has meant, you know, what has it meant? At the middle school, after several years of big increases in enrollment, we peaked in FY18 and began to decline. And in FY20, we were able to make some staffing cuts because it had declined enough. And then there was kind of no really significant change in enrollment projected for a while. The bottom line is that the current staffing level in general education is sufficient at the middle school right now. The high school peaked about FY19, started this projected gradual decline in FY21. As you will recall, we made 5.4 FTE cuts in the spring of 2020 when we were in shutdown and we had to do something because we wanted to reallocate to the elementary to make small in-person possible. And so then when we came back, we decided that we would just memorialize those cuts. We didn't want to hire everybody back knowing the enrollment was going down and we would just be cutting them again. So the cuts have kind of happened at the high school. Again, bottom line, current staffing level in gen ed at the high school is sufficient. The elementary, as we've been making cuts in secondary, if you look back over the last few budgets, the FTE has been reallocated to the elementary to support enrollment numbers and reasonable class sizes at the elementary level. So again, in the COVID, we way increased the staff to create in-person learning for our youngest learners. FY22 returned elementary staffing to typical levels, and we added 3.0 FTE general ed teachers to keep our elementary class sizes, particularly K2, very small coming out of the pandemic. Average class size is 17.8, really small. FY23, we maintained 70 sections. This budget reduces elementary general ed staffing from 70 to 69. So that brings us to the anticipated elementary enrollment. This chart, I call it anticipated as opposed to projected. It's not as fancy as that. We really just take who's in the room now, and we roll them up to the next grade. The part that's tricky is to figure out what will be happening in kindergarten. And so what you're looking at here is kindergarten students who are currently visible in the town census data. And this is what we do every year. So that number will likely increase. And the budget proposal plans for that scenario. I will say I am surprised by how low it is, though. So it should go up, but this is a pretty low number compared to what we usually see in the census data. So I have no insight into that, but it's lower than I would think. I don't know why that is. But what we can see usually happens is that the delta between what we could view in the census at this time and who's actually here, October 1 of the next year, is about 20. So we can pretty much count on 20 kindergartners coming in. What is harder to figure out is where they will be, right? So how are they going to be distributed? I haven't noticed a trend or any kind of discernible pattern there, right? So I don't know, it just depends, I think, where the houses are available for sale, so who knows? But the good news is, if we go back to this chart, imagine that we're creating sections here, right? Deerfield, 30. So that would be 2 sections of 15. That means that you could have 14 kindergartners move into Deerfield and still be within class size guidelines. Downey, 14 and 14, same thing, right? Across the board, Sheehan would be 3 sections if it were 45 in kindergarten. So what you can see is that in every scenario, we have tons of room in kindergarten. We're gonna have we'll have little tiny classes in every school for kindergarten, and we can absorb 20 and even more if there is something wonky about that.
So we're budgeting
census.
11 kindergarten?
Two, is that what's in here?
Yeah, 11, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And good news on Downey, that it seems like their bump that's occurred over the last several years.
Yeah.
If this is true, I mean,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, not good news, but you know what I mean? We've had this
Yes.
influx of Downey. And
So we haven't placed the sections yet, right? Like
Yeah.
you might end up with the K1 there. We haven't done that yet, but we do that later in the process after the enrollment kind of shakes out the registration. Okay, so I do just want to show, and this is to your earlier question, Tony, that what we've noticed over the last couple of years since coming out of shutdown with the pandemic is that there's just so much more movement in and out of the district over the summer than we had seen before. So if you look here, between this time last year and who actually showed up, we have 55 more elementary students in the district than we had before. The year before it was 39, right? So 20 at kindergarten. But then look at that grade 1 number. I mean, that was pretty surprising to see that number of kids. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if people like held their kids longer before sending them to kindergarten. I don't know if people waited to move, right? I don't really know. But it's a little different. And so we just have been seeing like more movement during the summer. So I think we just have to kind of like keep an eye on that going forward. With that said, the proposed FY24 budget allows us to respond to things that happened in the spring and summer. With 69 sections, there's still room to make strategic decisions here if you sort of did the numbers. And so staff allocations to schools will be made in late spring after the kindergarten enrollment process, and we have a better handle on what's happening.
Knowing
Yes.
that the kindergarten, incoming kindergarten class is so small, would we increase the number of Boston students that we bring on board?
So that number that you saw already included, bringing in, I think, a cohort of six kindergartners. So I don't know that we would do that. I'd have to look at the numbers and think ahead a little bit to see what that would be. But, our plan, so this year, obviously, like we brought in kids at every grade. The
Right.
plan really going forward is just to bring in a kindergarten class and to really focus on getting the kids in kindergarten acclimated. We are still bringing in probably, I think it's like 3 kids at 6th grade. That just has to do with like where we have seats and keeping the size of the program, what it needs to be for our grant.
Got it.
So that 24 includes the 6?
Yep,
Wow.
it does.
Only 18, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's low. So,
I think I know all.
So for grade 1, I'm just trying to, so there were 17 more kids than we thought would be?
so there were 17 more kids. Yeah, so there were 17 more kids in grade 1 this year than there were when those same kids were in kindergarten.
So 17 first graders moved into the district?
Mm-hmm.
That is bizarre.
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
And there was no other
Since this time last year. So some of them arrived in the spring. Some of
Right,
them may have been
right.
here in kindergarten for part of the year. I shouldn't overstate it, but
Right.
yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's like nuts. Okay, so turning to some student needs. So the FY24 continues robust funding and curriculum instruction. To clarify, you're not in that curriculum cost center, that is Allison's, you don't see increases to the line item, but what we do every year is we just prioritize what we're gonna spend those dollars on. So this year, social studies textbook adoption, that's one of the things. Elementary SEL curriculum, we'll be looking at. PD around restorative practices, those kinds of things. So we haven't done anything there. In terms of academic support, I just want to remind people that we have a very strong foundation to work from in the last 4 budgets. We have added lots of instructional staff. So elementary gen ed teachers that I just mentioned, elementary math specialists, middle school math and literacy specialists. That was really related to the schedule change and reallocating staff. Middle school department heads, which I have to say I think has been a really important position in terms of our curriculum development, aligning curriculum to standards, professional development, and then also high school academic support. We also, over the last couple of years, have increased positions related to student mental health, social emotional supports, and special education needs. elementary adjustment counselors, another adjustment counselor at the high school. We put the dean of students in. We did a district-wide testing psychologist. I mean, we have an SEL coordinator. Right? We've done a lot of things in this area. And reflecting what we have really heard from teachers, from principals, from parents, this budget, though it is a cut to level services, makes no cuts to the student services department. We're retaining those things. Okay, so what is the budget? So the proposed budget is a 4.5% increase over FY23, bringing the total to $54.1 million. To put that in context, and we looked at this last month, you know, typically the operating increase has been about 3.5%. We know that that's what is affordable and sustainable in Westwood under Prop 2.5. We had these really big years here when University Station came online, resulting in new growth that increased the tax levy. It was additional tax revenue that allowed for this big boost in operating budgets. It's still there, that money we still get every single year. It is the base that we live on, but there is not that kind of new growth anymore. University Station doesn't provide for increases. It just like keeps us going where we are right now. You can see 4.5% is high compared to that. The major budget categories, if we just take a look here, I think a couple things leap out. So you see that the incremental change in special ed is 26.6%. That reflects what we talked about at the beginning, about some of those drivers in special ed. I also want to point this out because it looks kind of strange since it's negative. What this is that we are proposing to convert a contractor for an HVAC controls engineer contractor position to an employee with a salary. So the cost is neutral. It's just that we're moving the dollars from a non-salary account, facilities, to salary. So that's why this looks low. It's just movement in the way we're accounting for it. I just want to show you this because, so this is the major budget categories, just town funds, right? Things that are voted at town meeting that come from tax revenue. This is a different look if we include all of the funds. So that would be grants, offsets, revolving funds, user fees, right? And so you can see here that we spend more dollars than you can see on the other chart, right? It's just that they're coming from different places and it changes the percentage then. So this is really important. This is related to that, the increase in the IDEA grant to offset IA salaries. And I will talk more about that in a few minutes because this is the creative thing that we're doing with the town. But those are one-time funds that are going to have to be backfilled in FY25. Here, we're proposing an increase in circuit breaker and that offset for tuitions and transportation for special ed. So you see that, and then you're seeing this change because it's the increased reliance on bus fees to pay for transportation.
Can you go back
Yes.
and just, under proposed FY24 budget, your total is 58.
It's because we're including all these offsets and grants. So we're saying that's how much money is actually spent, but the budget that's voted is 54 because the offsets are put in
Got it.
there.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. Good question. Okay. All right.
We thought you caught Lemma. She was thought you caught the inside.
No, trust me. I knew it was my fault.
That's good. Phew. Okay, so here's the budget. So we start with the FY23 budget. We have an increase in salaries for existing personnel of nearly $1.7 million. We have a net reduction in faculty or professional positions, down 138K. Net change in support staff. This is that one-time transfer from non-salary to salary. Again, no budget impact, cost neutral, right? And then a net increase to various salary accounts. And I want to point this out because this is $661,000. On this chart last year, it was $69,000, right? When we're talking about those drivers with the inflationary costs, with the special ed the 14% OSD increase, right? This is where we're seeing it. This is the issue this year and the challenge. So here's the total change that brings us to our recommended proposed budget. All right, yes? No?
Keep going.
Okay, so what's happening with salaries? So we're proposing what I would call 2 reallocations of salaries. So you mentioned that we are proposing to reduce 1.0 FTE elementary general education teacher. We've looked at those numbers. We've looked at where they are. We've thought, how would we split these into sections? And we think that we can reduce the number of elementary sections from 70 to 69. When you do that, all the classes are still within guidelines. In fact, the vast majority of them are under class size guidelines. And it still gives us some flexibility to strategically add a section if we need to somewhere, right? Like I think there's still, I can see more than one way to cut up the pie, so to speak, right? If we need to. So we would reduce that, and then we would add a 1.0 FTA special education teacher specifically for the peer program, which is a specialized district-wide elementary program currently located at Downey that supports students with autism. This program is at capacity. We have talked about the need for program expansion of peer for the last 3 budget cycles. It has never made it. It's always been on that page. What else got left on the cutting room floor? This is the year. We really have to do it. And so this would allow us to expand the program to a second location. If we would keep a classroom at Downey, but we would have another location at Martha Jones. And it takes more than a teacher. There's support staff affiliated with the program also, but we would reassign some of that support staff over to Martha Jones. Second reallocation.
And how many students does that will go with that?
Yeah, how many students, I don't know.
About.
Say between 6 and 8.
Okay.
To move, yeah.
And why did you decide on Martha Jones? Just because they have space?
So
next
Martha
year?
Jones has space.
Yeah.
That's a big one, and they don't have any other specialized programs there, right? So it kind of, we got programs at Deerfield and at Sheehan, and, right? So we'll put one at Martha Jones. So second is to reduce 1.0 FTE high school world languages. This position actually is currently unfilled. We didn't fill it late in the spring because we realized when we saw student elective choices that it was possible to create a master schedule and take one reduction. It just has, foreign language is an elective program, so people can choose to take whatever language they take, and there it is. What we did was we do need this 1.0 FTE floating nurse or nurse substitute. So this addresses a changed labor market. There basically are no nurse substitutes to be had on a per diem basis. And so we did this when we were struggling to find daily, we still are struggling to find daily teacher substitutes. And one thing that we tried, you'll recall in the budget, it was you put in like permanent building subs instead of doing the per diem thing. And we think that that's been good. We think that's really helped. Hasn't fixed it, but it's helped. So we want to try a similar strategy with the nurse. And it also would provide additional coverage. There's been a lot of energy to bring field trips back and, that kind of stuff. And so having the nurse there is helpful to be able to do that. Lets our nurses be out of the building to attend professional development,
What happens
et cetera.
now if someone calls in sick at 7 a.m. in a building, a nurse?
A nurse, we try to get a sub.
Okay.
And we try, and we often don't.
Okay.
We used to be able to get subs.
Yeah.
So there was a time when, just like with the
Okay.
teacher, you'd call the sub in, and we had a few people who subbed for us a lot and were
Okay.
familiar. But now if we don't, then what we do is that each nurse in the district has like a sister school.
Got it.
And so they have to work out a coverage plan because there are students who need to have medication administered at certain times, et cetera. Right, so that's what we do. Okay. Then we get into some things that are real reductions. And I heard some comments about this during public comment tonight. So we're proposing to reduce 0.5 FTE high school instructional technology and 0.5 FTE middle school instructional technology. So let me just say that there's nothing here that we thought, oh, there's an easy cut, right? We had extensive discussion about how we were going to land this budget, and so we made hard choices. and had to think about priorities and what impact is. And so this is not to diminish the value of these folks. However, during remote and hybrid learning, we think that teachers' skills around instructional technology were really accelerated. And so this felt like a place that we could potentially take a cut now. It factored into our decision to take the cut here. So the cuts reduce ITC staff from 1.0 to 0.5 at the middle school and 1.2 FTE to 0.7 at the high school. We do have 3 ITCs at the elementary who cover 5 buildings. And I want to point out, I'm going to turn to Steve because I don't know this number at the top of my head. This isn't tech support. This is instructional technology coaching. These are teachers, but we also have tech support positions. So like when you can't get your projector to work, you wouldn't necessarily call these people. Correct. And so we're not changing that staffing.
No, we have, collectively, we have 5 individuals that kind of handle that end level.
Right.
Our network manager and our technology support specialists.
Correct.
That's what they do.
Yes. So these folks provide instructional coaching to teachers. They also provide some direct teaching to students. So for instance, at the high school, we have a 9th grade seminar program around digital citizenship and all kinds of things. And so they deliver that curriculum. Then we're proposing a 0.75 FTE reduction in high school science. The high school population is expected to decline by about 20 students next year. We found some scheduling efficiencies by transitioning to S-block labs. And also we have some flexibility because we have teachers who are dually certified in science and math, and that factored into this decision to cut in science. Again, it's not a good choice. It's just that on the list of bad choices, this was like the least bad, right? So that will result in small increases in class size in science, but we do not believe that it will result in a change to course offerings. There is one small add here of 0.25 FTE high school English. So to respond to student intervention and enrichment needs, the English and high school departments at the math are going to be creating new seminar-style course offerings. It will increase instructional time with highly qualified content area teachers. So like shorthanded, like double dosing. Sometimes you have students who are working on particular skills in math, and it would be like they would have 2 math classes in a day or 2 English classes. The existing staffing levels in math is sufficient, but we do need an additional 0.25 in English to pull off this model. And it is flexible. So the way that we see the WIN block at the middle school, it isn't that a kid would be enrolled in that seminar necessarily for the whole year, right? They could move in and out. Okay, and then support staff positions. So we need to add 2 ABA tutors to meet IEP needs. And then we are reducing 1.0 FTE high school administrative assistant. Again, this is not optimal. We were really trying to do things that would minimize the impact on student learning. It's not great, but when weighed against other priorities, we decided that this is where to make the cut. And then we have that transfer from non-salary to salary that we mentioned. We did this with the electrician this year, and it's been great. It's like he's always here when we have an electrical need, and guess what? We always have an electrical need. It's like constant. So we think that this is going to be a great model as well. You don't have to call the HVAC guy and wait for him, like it's just right there.
You definitely have some HVAC issues.
We have some HVAC issues, exactly. And so this will be great. And the HVAC issues, as the technology gets better and better, are more and more complicated, right? I mean, these are people who, it's like a lot of it's run by computers. And
true programming.
It's true programming. So you have to have somebody who really understands this. And as we're bringing Hanlon-Deerfield online, that's a very complex system. We think this is going to be cost effective and just much better service. So no budget impact, but it changes where it is in the budget. All right, so that's salary. Should I pause or keep going?
I'll have a comment at the end
Okay.
about something.
Keep going.
Me too.
All right, all right. Keep going to non-salary. So non-salary, general education. So we're seeing an increase in subscriptions in curriculum instruction and in technology. That's $31,000. So this is like those online platforms that we use for student assessment, for planning for intervention, individualized content. You know, you see your kids doing some of that at home. Those subscriptions just keep going up. So our bills are going up. Similarly for our student information system, for time and absence reporting systems. So that reflects like real increases that we've seen. This is interesting. So an increase to the facilities budget for period products for students, $4,000. It's not a huge amount of money, but I'm calling it out because it's a great example of students taking initiative around something important. So we have, I think it's a total of 3 high school students who are driving this initiative to provide no-cost, stigma-free period products in our restrooms in the middle school and the high school. The students researched practices in other districts. They looked at some new state legislation around this. And then they made an appointment and pitched a proposal to I think, first to Amy and Davenport and then to Lemma, and really made a very persuasive case. And so this will cover the cost to install and supply dispensers in the middle school and the high school. So credit to those kids for
That's great.
their good thinking on this. And then it's a net reduction to professional development, but it's really good news. So we've increased PD for non-instructional staff like administrative assistants and custodians, particularly around some safety and security issues, including cybersecurity. And then, but the increase is offset by this reduction that just is on the same line, but it's really because we're taking PD dollars from the MECO grant. So it's more money for PD, it's just that the line looks like it's going down, if that makes sense. Non-salary for operations, we've talked about the bus contract, so that's an increase of $136,000. That reflects operating 17 yellow buses and the late buses at the middle school. Just to clarify, the 2 Boston buses and the Boston late bus are funded fully by the MECO grant. Increase in utilities of $112,000. So that's an additional $100K for fuel due to increase in natural gas rates, and this is very irritating to Leva and me, but it's a 2% increase to our fixed price contract for electricity, which was not supposed to increase. But there's this particular, law, and there is somewhere legally in the fine print that if something happens in the market, that they're allowed to do this thing. And we have checked that out. By we, I mean
They have a
Lemma.
clause in the fine print that says if state law changes, they're able to impose this 2% increase.
And it has.
And they're
Stupid
fine.
lawyers.
I know, right? So that's the bad news, but I do want to say in all seriousness, the good news is that we have a fixed price contract for electricity. So again, credit to Lemma because and Tom Philbin, because that was some good foresight to get that in place, or else we'd be talking about like the fuel, the natural gas things, the way we applied to electricity as well. We have an increase in athletic transportation, so the increased bus costs impact athletics as well, and to the ice rink rental. We haven't made an adjustment for additional costs in supplies and equipment and the cost for officials in this budget, but they're real.
Get ready. It's
Yeah,
huge.
I know. We're really, so we think what we need to do is like analyze all that in FY24 for the officials, you mean? Are you saying that at the youth
We
sports?
Westwood Youth Soccer, it's dramatic, like 60% increase. I mean,
Wow.
something
Really?
outrageous, something really like, the market's just gone. No one wants to ref anymore.
Huh.
Anyway, it's
Interesting.
huge. Like we had disrupt these just.
Okay, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm going, maybe we should
It was
be
something
looking at
dramatic.
that. Okay.
It was something really dramatic.
Really
not
dramatic.
Like just like the 10%. It was like.
Yeah,
something,
really dramatic. Huh.
Analyze it soon then.
All right, we're gonna
Yeah,
analyze
take a
that
look
soon.
at
Yes. Okay, so we gotta take a look at that. All right, turning to special education for a second. So just to remind you, you know this, that we continue to educate nearly all of our special ed students in district. Less than 1% of students are learning in out-of-district placements here. Our focus for FY24, maintaining current programming and service levels, meeting our legal and regulatory responsibilities, continuing to provide a robust ESY program. As we talked about, expanding peer is our priority. If we look at the non-salary increases in special education, here's what has happened to our out-of-district tuition. And so, again, this is part of the story. You can see it's an increase of $808,000 in tuition, $300,000 of which is that OSD increase of 14%. The other is either students with IEPs who moved in since we budgeted last year, or students who are currently here who have gone out of district during the year at some point.
Is that the collaborative, is that the tech, the last line?
That is, yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
sticking it to us.
Not really. So, not comparatively, so I will say the collaborative tuitions are exceedingly low compared to day and residential. That's why you pay an assessment, so that you can get in on that, right? Abby will back me up on that, yes. Okay, so what accounts for that, as I said, $808,000. It's $300K is the OSD, and then the rest is about changing student needs. Non-salary special education also involves special education transportation, both in district and out of district, and that is an increase of $116,000. Okay, so turning to the other side, revenue assumptions. So just want to sort of talk briefly about special education funding sources here for a second. So as you can see, we know special education can be a significant driver. So first, special education is funded by town funds, the things in the budget, right, that we vote at town meeting, tax revenue. We also have a special education reserve account for unanticipated costs, and that is funded in two ways. The town occasionally dedicates additional funds to that. They'll vote to transfer some money from free cash to special ed reserve. We also contribute on an ongoing basis via the Medicaid claiming process. So that's how we fund that. This is important that this special education reserve account, which it's set up under a particular law, it can only be used for unanticipated costs in special ed. You cannot budget against it, okay? So that really is a reserve. We also get federal grant money, federal IDEA grant money. That amount varies from year to year, and we have to estimate that during the budget process. And then we've talked a lot about circuit breaker. That's that state funding. It's partial reimbursement for very high-cost special education placements. Involves a claiming process. It's paid in arrears. So we say, well, here are what we believe are tuitions for this year that are eligible for circuit breaker. We analyze that. We submit for reimbursement. We hope that they agree with us on the eligibility, and sometimes they don't, right? And then we get partial reimbursement the following year. And so when your expenses go up, you can claim for more. When your expenses go down, you can claim for less. But of course, because you're paying it and then it's in arrears, it's never quite right? Like it's not in sync. So our revenue assumptions for this year. The FY24 budget incorporates $837,000 of increases in revenue assumption that were critical to reducing the overall operating budget increase to 4.5%. What were they? So this budget includes an increase of $400,000 for the circuit breaker offset. It raises the circuit breaker offset from $750K to $1.1 million. That reflects an anticipated larger reimbursement next year based on our analysis of known tuition and transportation that we're going to submit for this year that we think are going to be eligible. Okay.
So
yes,
we put it in the budget this year as 1.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then next year we get paid. And if we get paid $1 million next year, we then have to find that difference next year.
Well, so we'll keep getting circuit breaker reimbursement. And we do have some idea, right? Like we kind of know what our tuitions are. We know how old those kids are. We know where the placements are, right? So it's not like we're totally blind from year to year. So we can project out things like that. That's part of it. You also, sort of like new growth revenue, so.
Yeah, I'd say this one is really complex and hard to untangle because also we're in a good position in circuit breaker where during the pandemic, we were able to get to a place where we take the funds that we are collecting this year, incoming funds for circuit breaker, and we'll be using them for next year's budget. So a good chunk of that 1.1 million is arriving this year. And it's only the gap that we'll have to use next year's revenue to fill, potentially.
Makes sense.
So so we actually we'll have most of it by the end of June this year. We'll have most of that money. I think 700, maybe even 900 will be in our hand, and we'll be carrying it in.
So
and
it's
then
just the
first
gap.
quarterly payment we might have to depend on. So it's just the gap that we'll need to rise.
Yes.
All right.
I feel like Abby wants to say something else about that.
Because your costs are rising, you could comfortably assume your circuit breaker would
go up.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And Lemma has gotten us to the point now where, yeah, we are, like, we're not budgeting as an offset typically until we have it, right?
Okay.
Whereas you could really go risky, right, and budget.
When we went into this year, that's
Yeah.
exactly the position we were in. We had 100% of the cash when we started the school year in our accounts, and we entered the school year with those funds. Next
This-
year would be a slightly more risky position, but I think only like, so it's not at all risky because Abby and I have looked at the students and we know the claim will come in. We also, the overlap, the revenue would come in the first quarter. So we
Yep.
know it'll,
It'll be
meet
there.
that
It'll
gap.
be there. So we think this is okay. We don't think we can go higher than this, but we think this is okay. A solar revenue offset increase of 25K. So we have this Woburn solar array that we have a purchasing agreement with. We've kind of got a handle of what we can expect now, so we can increase the offset from 25K to 50. Okay, so this is the part that's a little tricky. So the special education IDA grant offset, we're increasing by $216,000. $16,000 of that is an increase in the actual grant that we project would recur. We just think that like our annual IDA grant is going up by $16,000. Okay. The other part of it is $200,000 of one-time IDA money that was related to COVID relief that is set to expire in FY24. So we have actually talked about this money for a long time. So we had the money last year, but we closed the year and we said, let's try to close the year and save that money for FY23 in case we have unexpected tuitions or, right, special ed things. So we hung on to it. And so that money is part of the strategy to close this year's deficit, special education reserve and that grant, right? It actually doesn't expire until FY24, but we thought we're going to need to spend it this year to close the gap. In speaking with budget steering, the town has suggested that at this year's town meeting, in Article 2, which is the supplemental appropriation to the current year's operating budget. This is where they do like the snow and ice, something, right? That they propose putting in there $200,000 as a supplement to this year's budget to account for these unanticipated special education tuitions this year, thereby helping us to close FY23 and not spending that grant so that we can push that grant forward to FY25 and by increasing the IDA offset. That's like a 0.4% reduction to our operating budget, right?
Push it forward to FY24.
Did I say 25? FY24 to FY24, right? So this was a very creative and helpful idea to allow us to apply the IDA grant differently. So that's great news for FY24. However, I just want to point out that that's one-time money. And so in FY25, you won't have that $200,000 anymore for that grant offset, and that $200K will have to be backfilled. That $200K is in the budget as an offset to provide salaries for instructional assistants. Right? That's why there was that difference on the chart in the budget categories. It'll have to be backfilled, but we have a plan for that. So we believe that there are at least two positions that we have identified that we were referring to as one more time salaries, because we need them in FY24 for Hanlon and Deerfield, but in FY25, we think that those two positions could be reduced in conjunction with the consolidation. So I think what you need to anticipate is that in the FY25 budget, you will reduce those two salaries and you will reallocate that salary money to backfill that $200,000.
Remind me, what were the two positions we assume right now?
So a nursing position and an SLPA.
Got it.
Okay.
So that takes care of FY25.
Yeah.
But don't we have this 200 gap going forward?
No, Well, we're increasing it here. I mean, it will all be a different calculation by, by FY '26. It's all gonna be different by then, but.
We would be cutting the budget by about 200,000
Thousand.
in FY '25's proposed budget, effectively solving this problem.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's
Got
what's
it.
gonna
Could be
happen.
conservative. We're not assuming any general ed right now savings in that 200,000.
So we're not,
Like
no, we're
classroom
not.
consolidation, yeah.
I think that is likely to happen too, but I think it is premature
that's
to
fine. No, I
like count
just-
those
yeah.
chickens, right?
Yeah, no,
So,
that's
yeah,
fine.
but I do think that this is likely, I think this is very, very
Yeah.
likely, right? So, I think this will work. And as you know, we've got some challenges, so we had to get creative this year to do this. So I think I think it's a good solution. Okay. And then we are proposing increases in user fees and in preschool tuition. This is going to generate an additional approximately $216,000 in revenue. So we've proposed a 3% increase to preschool tuition. We've proposed a bus fee increase from $180 per student to $270 per student, and to raise the family cap from $450 to $750. And then an athletic fee increase at the high school to raise the fee from $250 per sport to $300 per sport. Slightly higher surcharge for hockey, which is a very expensive program due to the ice rental and whatnot. And then at the middle school, $125 to $150. $300 for football. So currently it's $200 for middle school football, and it would go to $300. And to raise the family cap from $750 to $1,050. We looked at this last month when we started talking about it. I just thought I'd put it up here again. We did look at comps of our neighboring districts, and our current bus fee, $180, you can see is very low compared to other districts. It was implemented at $180. It's never gone up. So this is where the proposed fee would put us, again, still right in the middle of the pack. And then similarly for Tri-Valley League athletic fees, so this is sorted by cap, by family cap. So you can see there are a number of districts that have no cap. So if you had, 5 kids who played 3 sports, you'd be in big trouble. But our cap is currently the lowest in the Tri-Valley.
I don't like this chart because.
Yeah.
I mean, we should just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense that NEMA only says 40 families, 45 families a year take advantage of the cap.
Yeah.
So it's okay for the highest, and I know it's just a little money, but
Yeah.
we are. I just think we just need to be. We're a little inconsistent. We're saying we want to be in the middle on buses.
So you think that this is high?
Well, I'm not saying it's high. I'm just saying we should just be
Yes.
honest.
I was about to be honest
Okay,
and to
don't
point
spin
out.
it. Don't spin it. It is what it is.
And I did point this out when I presented this to staff
Okay.
today, that if you sorted it differently,
Yeah,
right,
I mean-
then yeah, we'd be like right up here.
I'm not saying it's.
We'd be
it's not-
below Dover, Sherburne,
Yeah.
but that's it.
And I'm guessing,
Yeah.
I'd be interested, are other schools looking at fees this year? I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know. I mean, with athletics, I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm
I
guessing.
don't know.
Yeah, but anyway,
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
fine, it's fine. It's not huge money, it's just, I think we should just present it as it is.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
the 40 to 45 families that you mentioned take advantage of it. Is it
Yeah.
because you have to apply for the cap, or is it automatic? How does that work?
No, it's
No, I think
It's
it's
a-
automatic.
It's
once you
automatic,
reach
okay.
that thing.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you have, one student who plays 3 sports,
Right,
you're still just below the cap,
right.
right? But if you have another kid who plays a sport, now you're above the cap.
And we do waivers on these as well, right?
We do. We
Yeah,
do waivers
yeah,
on all
yeah.
the fees.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. I mean, it's fine. I just, just present.
I could have sorted it differently. You're correct. It's so funny. I didn't think that's what you were going to say, because usually what the committee says is, "Why are we always the lowest?" And
Well,
I thought
yeah, I
that's
mean-
where you were going. Okay, so looking beyond FY24, what priorities do we anticipate in upcoming budget cycles? So I put this list up, and here's what I want to say. Everything except the last bullet on the list has been on the list for multiple years, right? This increase in ELL staffing, I've lost track of how many years that's been on there. We talk about it every year. Opening an additional preschool classroom, we've talked about that a lot. That's also a space issue. I mean, there are a lot of things, but the startup costs to open an additional preschool classroom are significant. And believe me, I mean, we heard at office hours, there's a real desire for this in the community. But it's a teacher plus 2 IAs, enough space, appropriately sized furniture, right? There's some one-time costs. And it's an integrated preschool program, and so about half the students in the room would pay tuition. The tuition in no way would cover the cost of opening another classroom. Still, it would be great. It'd be great for the community. It'd be great for us in terms of our ratios and special ed. So this is an interesting thing to keep in mind. We would like to be able to restore middle school library staffing. We really want to be able to do that. After the consolidation, there will be a full-time librarian in all of the elementary schools. There's a full-time librarian at the high school. You recall that this was a COVID situation, like when we were in that spring 2020 trying to figure out what to do, it happened that the middle school librarian was retiring. And so we took the cut there because it meant it was a way to fix our budget problem without laying anybody off, and we haven't been able to get that back. We're still interested in expanding elementary specials offerings, art, music, all that. And we would really, really like to add a human resources director. I'm not even going to say more about that. I fear I would go on. Okay. So the last bullet here, though, is new. I just want to point it out that we added 1.2 elementary adjustment counselors this year using ESSER grant funding, federal COVID relief, one-time money. We got $170,000. We spent half of it this year for these salaries. We'll spend the other half next year, and then it will be fully spent. And so for FY25, you will have to decide if you want to figure out a way to increase the operating budget to pay for those elementary adjustment counselors, or reallocate from some other place in the budget, or eliminate the positions. You know, I never would normally recommend using grant funding to fund salaries, ever, for the obvious problems. In this case, we really thought of these positions as sort of temporary stabilization responses to COVID. But I think that they're really useful in the district right now. So
How many are there?
there's,
under the
so it's
ESSER grant?
1.2, but it's 3 people sort of working part-time across schools.
It's two people.
Two people.
2 of the .4s are composed of the same unit.
I see, okay.
Martha Jones and Sheehan are
Does
pretty
that make
close
sense?
together.
Right, so 0.8 and a 0.2.
Yep.
Right. Okay. All right, and then Lemma, what would you like to say about capital?
So you're familiar with this chart. This is a summary of the last 5 years of annual capital budgets, and you'll see that we've been funded at a steady level by the town over the last 5 years. So we've allocated those funds within the same categories. In FY24, the most important things here to note are that we are applying this idea of setting aside funds in technology and roofing for future year use. So we continue to contribute to our savings for those purposes. In the technology area in particular, we've made a lot of device purchases in recent years. This year, we've depleted our budget completely and locked up all of our funds. In FY24, we start to set aside $120K to contribute to a big device upgrade and refresh that will happen in FY26. So FY26, 27, 20, those years we'll start to see a lot of new purchases of equipment, replacement MacBooks for our teachers, replacement Chromebooks for our students. The costs are high. It'll be over $400K in those years, and so we're going to need to set aside funds for that. In roofing, we have a substantial budget already. It exceeds $800K, but we have been chipping away at it with some repairs in recent years, and we're going to be setting aside $100K additional. We're doing a moisture study of roofing, and we're going to be giving you an update on what that report says. It'll guide what sections of roof we'll replace over the next year or so. And then a key new one, I didn't highlight it. At the bottom here is the facilities line for vehicles. So we're setting aside $125K for vehicles. There's a van that we hope to buy this year. We were not able to purchase for the facilities department because we had a tractor that failed instead. So that became an emergency replacement that we needed to act on. The van is part of the budget for FY24. And then we are setting aside funds as well for a tractor for the Hanlon Deerfield site, because our facilities crew will be clearing the sidewalks and paths in that school. It's not the DPW that does that. So they do the parking lots, but we also have obligations there. So we're going to be planning ahead for that.
Can I just clarify, so this is not a new vehicle, like we're not adding a vehicle, this is replacing a
The
van?
facilities van is a replacement.
A replacement,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and so here are some things.
Yeah, and then I've highlighted, just because people want to know where we spend the rest of our funds, like the building improvements line and the HVAC line. So I've highlighted some examples of capital projects that are on our radar and that we are currently seeking quotes for. And we do plan to have a longer conversation with the school committee about these capital projects later this spring. But you can see fire alarm panel upgrades at Downey, Martha Jones, and Sheehan are at the top of my list because it's a safety issue and our technology is just outdated, and it is time to replace or upgrade that. Those are costly upgrades. Just one school has been quoted at $50,000. So to go ahead and make the move on all three right there is $150,000 of our facilities improvement budget. We also have an HVAC pipe replacement at the middle school that is needed. That would probably be a staged project that we take on. So some of these pipes have been failing in recent months, and the middle school staff have experienced the impact because when that happens, we have to shut down our heat. So we will be making strategic replacements. The first one will happen even this spring, but we also are planning as part of FY24 to set aside some funds for, again, this will be a phased project, so a phase of this. And there are many other things on this list that I could speak to, but the high school is now, it's constructed 2004, so approaching 20 years and needs significant maintenance. So glycol replacement is a part of the heating system here. There's a boiler replacement that is due at the high school as well as at Downey. So despite the fact that we've got, you know, brand new building opening up, our other buildings continue to require work. And this is the list of some of the things that we'll be talking about.
Okay, so I always put this up. How do we compare in per pupil spending? And so we're the green star. Oh, I did not adjust this. It looks like Sharon has something special about it, but actually that's supposed to be the state average is the red dot. So, so here we are, the green star. And so you can see we're in good company here in terms of, here's Needham. They're like a little bit above us, but we're about in line. And then you can see that the curve kind of goes up dramatically here. I do want to say a strange thing happened on the Boston Magazine rankings this year. What seems strange to me is that our ranking went down. I couldn't figure that out, right? But I can never figure out the rankings. Like, you can't tell what the calculation is. But then some other superintendents noticed that they weren't even on it. Medfield, Concord, Carlisle, right?
They weren't on the list?
I noticed that Concord wasn't on it. I gasped, right? So, so you know, what's going on? And it turns out, here's what's going on. And this explains also why our ranking is down. So one of the things that they factored in was the percentage of students, like graduates, who are now enrolled in four-year college, or in college. I don't know if it's four-year college. And so the guy who does this, it's like one guy who does all of this analysis for Boston Magazine, pulls the data from DESE. And that particular statistic at DESE comes from this national clearinghouse. And the data for that is the colleges and universities have to report their data. Well, the data for several colleges and universities were missing. And so if you look at ours, and this didn't make sense to me, I was like, what is that? It said that like 87% of our kids were in college. It should have been like 97%, right? And the same thing happened, and the folks who weren't on the list really pursued that, like at DESE, to figure it out, right? And sent out emails, did this happen to anyone else, and whatnot. So the whole list is a little wonky this year. It's not really the same cohort as in years past, and it explains a lot, but it does not appear to me that Boston Magazine is going to redo the issue. So Concord Carlisle would be right here, I can tell you from past graphs, right? They're clearly missing. But, you know, my point here is that we're actually a little below the median here, and I think that our per pupil spending is like in the right place. We would expect to be a little higher than the state average, but we're not nearly where some of these other communities are. And I think it speaks to sort of the value, the return on investment, I guess is what I would say, that you get in Westwood. So next steps, we present to the Finance and Warrant Commission on February 7th. At the February 9th school committee meeting, that would be the public budget hearing. Something that is going to happen here is this, and this is important. So I've presented a 4.5% budget. The town has really worked with us to help us get that from like 5 to 4.5 with that creative thinking. There's still a gap between what I've proposed and that 3.5, 3.6 that we know is going to be the revenue coming in from taxes. So that's still a problem that we're talking about at budget steering. And the municipal budget has a similar problem, right? So there's still a gap, and we all kind of know that. What I will say is that in the budget steering process, and I have really appreciated the conversation and the willingness to sort of like understand each other's needs, there really has been like a commitment. They knew I was going to come in at 4.5, and there's been a commitment to saying yes, and we're going to work towards doing that. That is not a sustainable number over time, right? But in this 1 year where we have clear challenges, it's like, how are we going to get there? There's still some information that we just don't have at this point that I'm hoping will help answer that question of how to bridge that gap for this year. We don't have the Chapter 70 estimates yet. With the new governor coming in gets a 5-week extension in terms of getting her proposed budget out. And that's when we get the cherry sheet, when we get the estimate of the Chapter 70 money. So normally we would have that around now, but we won't have it until sometime in February. So I hope that Chapter 70 is going to come in high and that we are going to see, I'm going to say, a significant increase in our Chapter 70 funding, which I think could happen because under the Student Opportunity Act, it was supposed to happen. They're off track. There is also an inflationary cap related to Chapter 70. There's a lot of advocacy now from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, the Superintendent's Association, the MTA, encouraging them to waive the cap for this year, given the rate of inflation. So, making up a number, if that came in $250,000 higher than last year, that would help, that'd fix 0.5% of our gap, right? And so I think we have to wait to see what's going to happen with Chapter 70. So everybody really cross your fingers and toes for that estimate. When that spreadsheet comes out, we will be waiting to open it. We also, the town doesn't have information about the GIC health benefits. Maybe that'll come in lower than the placeholder they have. So we don't know what's going to happen. There's still a lot of things to look at. There's still more work to be done. We'll be meeting with the FinCom Education Subcommittee. The FinCom has budget hearings throughout March, and of course this all leads to the annual town meeting in May, where residents come and we hope support our budget. So there it is.
It's a lot to absorb.
That's a lot.
Any questions?
So, this has a lot of assumptions, particularly with the contract, with the teacher contract.
Yes.
If we are wrong in those assumptions, right, depending on how that shakes out, we could potentially be looking for more. We would have a bigger deficit, correct?
Yes,
Like we'd have to.
Yep. So
I'm just trying to figure out how
the
these
4.5% increase that we've figured out to get to with all of these different factors has an assumption. If the assumption were wrong, right, like if it were too low in the salary increase, yes, then we would have to make additional cuts. I mean, I don't have any other ideas for increasing revenue, so we would then have to account for that to get us back to 4.5. If that makes sense, right? The increase to salaries would go up, and then we would have to figure that out.
Right.
How to get that number back down.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You have more? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. The question is on capital, and maybe this is for the spring meeting when we talk about this. I know Steve was talking about applying for some grants around security pieces, so when I talked, this was back in the fall. So we don't need to talk about it now, but I'd just be interested when you talk about capital, if there's any, obviously that will be part of it, and there might be some grants piece.
Yeah.
And this isn't really a capital question, but I was just curious on the solar. Is that happening this summer? The
canopies?
Yeah. Do we know yet or no?
No, they don't. I heard from Amoresco, and they don't think they can get the materials in. And the select board has still not voted, I don't believe, on,
Okay.
the
Okay.
PPA. So that is scheduled
Okay.
for the next meeting.
Fine.
But that's yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So
And
we
that
anticipate it would be the summer of
Got it. That's fine.
2024
Yeah.
was when construction would happen.
So, I mean, I guess my comment, I mean, I think the thing that most disappointed me was actually the science, for me personally. Just because I know we'd had a 1.2 reduction like a year or 2 years ago, and there's another 0.75. And I just think of Charlie. Some of you didn't know the committee 6 years ago. He was the biggest advocate for increasing funding, and I look at some of the MCAT scores increasing in science. So I just think we've invested a lot there since we did the curriculum review back in 2015. So I just think that just is a little bit not disappointing you, but just disappointing in the sense of what's going on. And I'm not humanities degrees are going rightly or wrongly down with the universities, science degrees up. It's just more as I think about, and I think we can probably deal with it, but it's just could start to be like you start to see you can't go, you can only go so far, and it probably will work, but it's just I think that one for me kind of stung a little bit. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed too.
Yeah,
So
no,
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you. Yes, and I had a lot of discussions with Amy,
yeah.
and that's where we landed. Yeah.
Any other questions?
And it seems to me, just based on what we're talking about and the cuts we've already had to make, that the 4.5 is really a floor, right? Like we do not want to go below that 4 point. Is that right? Is that safe to say?
That certainly is my feeling. Yes, I mean, so okay, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions as a leadership team about budget, and so we have identified cuts way beyond this, right? And we avoided making them because we did other things, right? We increased the fees, we increased the offset, we talked to the town, right? So, we had 3 tiers of cuts, and we only incorporated the first tier here, right? So all that to say, I do know what the next couple of tiers would be, and they would be painful. Right? I mean, tier 3, I have to tell you, is like unthinkable to me. Tier 2 is still, really hard. So I don't want to go there, which is why I presented 4.5.
Right.
Right. So I'm hoping we can do it. We can sustain a bigger increase one time. I understand we can't do this year over year over year.
I had the opportunity to meet with the Budget Steering Committee one time. I wasn't there all the time. It's
The dog.
overwhelming. But what impressed me was the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, FinCom, Town Manager, who were very, very impressed with Lemma and Emily's detail, knowledge, every question they had. So first off, they're overwhelmed with how much we knew, or they knew. And the result of the meeting is they went out of their way to help us in every possible way. So it's not like giving us a hard time. They say, can we help? So the town's trying to help us out.
Yeah.
They respect, for 6 years, we've been at 3.5 or less. They respect that. And then they also realize all of the things that have caused it to go. So we're in a unique position, I think, to have the town supporting us, respecting what's been going on. And I want to pay tribute to Emily and Lemma to go through this kind of detail in responding to all of those types of questions. So I think we're lucky in that. It's going to maybe change next month with all these, but I think we're prepared to do that. I also want to Emily wrote a very interesting letter about some of the results of Allison did the analysis of how Westwood has done over the COVID period, recovering, how have our test scores been. And I was very impressed with it. But I think what wasn't fully said in this is that the 5th grade came in number 7 in science, and the 6th grade number 11 out of 352 cities and towns. It's not like, what are you measuring it? This is the whole state. That's how well those 2 groups in science did. In our math, the 4th graders were number 9, 5th graders 3 out of the whole state. So it's an incredible statement on how competitive during COVID and all of this our teachers have been in our education. So I was very, very impressed with that also. So I think we have an option here to decide, do we need another meeting next week to further discuss things, refine things? Or do we feel comfortable moving ahead to our next meeting in February? I'm sure we'll have new information, all of these reports come in and what that, to proceed with what our recommendations are. So my first question is, do people feel we need another meeting to discuss any of this further, or do you feel comfortable enough to move on to our next meeting in February, when FinCom and all of this will be done, and we'll have more information before we make our recommendation? What's the sense of the
I don't know about
committee?
you. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't need
Okay, so I
another
think
meeting.
we'll just.
I don't think there'll be new information between now and next week, so,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So, anything further we need to know today, so we can move on?
January 26th is off, so we got
good.
that, okay. No,
Charlie, I
thank
just
you.
wanted to add one thing, which is that I really appreciate that there were not any cuts to the student. Sir, I'm sorry, Abby's division. I'm
Student
tired.
services.
Student services. Because I do think that's one of the things that sets us apart from other districts in a very distinct way. The many offerings that we have. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that. It's it makes us really strong as a district.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're not making any cuts there. So
Thanks for saying that.
thanks
And I
for
have to say,
figuring
in
that out.
making that decision, we really have listened to what staff has told us
Yeah.
about what the needs are, and so it did not, it seemed important to preserve the staff there and, in fact, to expand in some areas.
Yep.
Well, I think we're ready to move on for some approval of minutes. Make this as speedy as we possibly can. First off, we need to approve the December 8th, 2002 minutes. And what I'm gonna basically say, do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Oh,
I'm just gonna run through.
I think
Dory?
you
I think
don't,
we-
don't
nope.
need to, since
We're
we're
not
not virtual.
virtual.
You can do a voice vote, you can do all in favor.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. The next one is December 15th minutes. Motion,
moved.
second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Moving right along. January 6th minutes, motion,
So moved.
Second.
approval?
Aye.
And then the calendar, I don't know if you'd like to look at it and get feedback from people, or
Oh,
don't
we
need to-
did, so when did we do that?
done
I'm
that.
losing track of the
We've
months.
done
I think
that,
we
yeah.
looked at that in
So,
November.
okay, so
I
we-
meant to bring it in for the vote in December, but forgot, so so we're voting it.
So any motion to approve
Well, so I
the school
just,
calendar?
sorry, I just have a question. I
Yes.
know, did we have a snow day?
For this year.
This year, right?
But this is next year's school calendar.
Oh, next year, okay.
Yeah. But yes, we did.
We'll probably have a lot more.
It's very late. I'm very
Yeah.
tired.
So,
All those numbers.
a motion to
I'll
approve
motion
the-
to approve the school calendar for
Second.
next year.
the second.
yeah.
Those in favor?
Aye. And if
Okay.
Harley can get that up on the website, people always start asking
The
questions.
draft is there, but
Alright,
we'll
great. Thank you.
take the draft off of it.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, so we need to table the vote to ratify the IA's
Yeah.
assistance agreement, and that's just because we're still like typing it up and everything. And so they will have taken a vote prior to the February meeting, and we can have that all done.
Can I ask, it's probably a dumb question, but it's been talk lately. Where can you find the high school dates for the terms? Like when term 1 closes, term 2?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that
I know
question.
it's
just because-
somewhere.
So there is something, I will say, it's always in the principal's newsletter. It's like this standing thing that's called Reports to Parents and has all the dates. And I know where to find it as a staff member, but I don't know where to find it as a parent. So and poor Amy is sick tonight, so
Oh, yeah.
I will.
I know it's
find
there,
out.
but
It's probably in Aspen. That's so funny. Sorry, Steve.
everything's an Aspen.
It's absolutely an Aspen. Don't go and ask it.
Yes, I will find out and
Okay.
have that information in the near future.
You know, the term ended.
Like when the
or
term's
is
end.
ending tomorrow, and I think there was confusion between last week and this week, and
Yeah.
I know I've seen it, I just don't remember where.
Last
Yeah.
item, new business. Any new business not anticipated by the chair?
I just wanted to ask 2 questions. One was, I know this has taken a lot of time. If maybe in February or March, we could do the equity audit readout or update?
Probably.
Okay.
We still don't have it.
Oh,
So,
okay, well, then
we're
that's-
still ready, so
that's
maybe.
preventative,
But if
yeah,
not then,
okay, yeah.
it's still in
Yeah.
progress.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then I know, Mayor, you had asked about doing an update on the Metco program.
Yes.
So again, I know everybody's been busy, but I didn't want that to get lost.
Thank you.
Um,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I think we'll have the wellness curriculum review soon too. I mean, we have lots of
Finally
things on
bringing
the.
that plan in for later.
What about math?
Exciting.
What about
When's
math?
math?
Right, it's been a
When's
long
math
time.
coming? When's math coming?
Who?
Math.
Oh, math.
Would you be looking at math?
So we're math is like on normal timeline now. It's long as it's not.
Yeah.
January newsletter, if you go to the website, high school page, the newsletters are listed, click on January, scroll all the way down to the bottom.
I don't know if that's the official system, but you can get it there,
Okay.
right? So.
So,
There we go.
high school page,
Newsletter.
newsletter.
Maybe I could do
Where's
it
the
in real time.
newsletter?
High school webpage.
So I'm on the,
Like in the middle,
Scroll down, maybe.
high school.
oh, here we go, all the
There it is.
newsletters.
Just click on January.
January,
Click on it.
Click right here.
Yeah, just click on it.
click again. Oh, here we go.
That's great.
Scroll down.
Oh, yeah.
Not there.
Scroll
Oh,
down.
January newsletter. It's a lot of clicks.
All the way down to the bottom?
This is where I have seen it. Yes, you're right. At the end of the
All the way at the
newsletter.
bottom.
There it
Talk about
is.
buried.
Oh my God, really?
Every month to print off the lunch calendar.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. We found
Just
it.
where you'd expect to find it.
Yes. Yeah, so there's probably another place, but she always has it as the last page in the newsletter.
Okay.
Always, so.
I may just not have
Okay.
ever scrolled that far. In full honesty.
I want to thank Holly for putting up with us and keeping us organized.
Thank you, Harley.
Could I have a motion to adjourn
So
our
moved.
meeting?
Maybe. Or somewhere easily
So
clickable.
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
Do I have a
moved.
Second.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Right.
Remember,